What if one simple trick in the sky could turn a quiet farm boy into the deadliest fighter pilot of World War II? Richard Bong wasn't the loudest, fastest, or most aggressive pilot, but he mastered a shocking tactic that even Japan's top aces couldn't stop. That single idea helped him shoot down 40 enemy aircraft. Today, we uncover the extraordinary story of the farm kid who rewrote aerial combat and whose final chapter may leave you deeply moved. Declassified, 1944. High above the suffocating jungles of the Pacific, a lone predator scans the sky. Far below, Japanese fighters scramble for altitude, desperate to intercept American bombers. Engines roar, pilots strain, every second counts. But they have no idea they are already being hunted. Somewhere above them waits a ghost. And that ghost is not the hardened killer they would expect. Not a swaggering warrior or a battle-scarred veteran. He is a quiet farm boy from Wisconsin. By the end of the war, he will score 40 confirmed aerial victories, a record of lethal precision that no American pilot has ever broken. How did the most unassuming pilot in the U.S. Army Air Forces become its deadliest weapon? This is the story of the man the enemy couldn't kill, the record no one has matched, and the brutal truth behind America's ace of aces. While Bong was sharpening his skills in the cockpit, the world was collapsing into war. In Europe, the Nazi war machine crushed nation after nation. Across the Pacific, Imperial Japan launched a relentless campaign of conquest. By 1941, the United States was still a sleeping giant, but the storm was approaching fast. Like thousands of young Americans, Richard Bong felt the pull of duty. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program, driven not by dreams of glory, but by a simple love of flight. From the moment he took control of an aircraft, instructors noticed something extraordinary. Bong didn't just fly airplanes, he fused with them. The controls moved as if guided by instinct. Flying felt natural to him, effortless. But with that raw talent came a dangerous restlessness. Bong constantly pushed limits, testing both himself and the machines he flew. Stationed at Hamilton Field in California, Second Lieutenant Bong encountered the aircraft that would shape his legend, the P-38 Lightning. Twin-engine, heavily armed, and incredibly fast, it was one of the most powerful fighters in the American arsenal. Bong fell in love with it instantly, but that passion quickly turned reckless. Official reports would later describe his actions as unauthorized aerobatic maneuvers. The truth was far bolder. Bong roared his P-38 down Market Street in San Francisco so low that people on the sidewalks could see the rivets on the wings. Then he performed an even more outrageous stunt, flying a loop around the Golden Gate Bridge, a breathtaking violation of military rules. To some, it looked like showing off. But Bong was doing something else entirely. He was probing the limits of the aircraft and of himself. His commanding officer, General George Guinea, had little patience for reckless pilots. As commander of the 5th Air Force, Guinea was responsible for America's entire air campaign in the Pacific. Discipline mattered to him. When Bong was brought before the general, the young lieutenant expected his career to end on the spot. The reprimand was severe. Guinea made it clear the behavior was unacceptable. But as he studied the quiet farm boy standing before him, he saw something rare. There was no arrogance in Bong's eyes, only absolute confidence in the aircraft he flew. Kenny recognized what Bong's instructors had seen from the beginning: a prodigy. Instead of destroying the young pilot's career, Kenny made a bold decision. He kept Bong under his command, gave him more training, and prepared him for the battles ahead. The reckless farm boy would not be grounded. He would be forged into a weapon and unleashed over the Pacific. Before the story continues, there's a question hanging in the air. Do you think Richard Bong was simply a gifted pilota, or was there something deeper that turned a quiet farm boy into the deadliest ace in American history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories that uncover the hidden truth behind legendary figures, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next chapter of this story only gets more intense. By September 1942, Richard Bong arrived in New Guinea, the brutal front line of the Pacific War. American forces there were desperately trying to stop the Japanese advance. The enemy pilots he faced were not rookies. They were battle-hardened veterans who had been fighting since 1937. Many flew the legendary Mitsubishi A6M0, a fighter so agile it could outmaneuver almost anything the Allies had in the sky. On paper, a quiet farm boy from Wisconsin with limited combat experience seemed completely outmatched. But Bong had one powerful advantage: his aircraft. He flew the P-38 Lightning, a revolutionary fighter designed at Lockheed by Clarence Kelly Johnson. With its strange twin-boom shape and two roaring Allison engines, the P-38 looked unlike any aircraft in the sky. It was fast, climbed quickly, and carried devastating firepower. 4.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon were mounted together in the nose, allowing the aircraft to fire straight ahead in a tight stream of bullets and explosives. If a pilot placed an enemy aircraft in his sights for even a moment, the result could be catastrophic. Yet the Lightning had a dark side. It was difficult to fly and unforgiving of mistakes. Its complex turbo superchargers were temperamental, and in high-speed dives, it could suffer from a frightening effect known as compressibility, where shock waves froze the controls and sent the aircraft into a fatal plunge. Many American pilots died simply learning how to control the powerful machine. Japanese Zero pilots also had a deadly advantage. They lured American fighters into slow-turning dogfights, where the Zero's agility made it nearly unbeatable. Any pilot who tried to outturn a Zero often died within seconds. Richard Bong quickly realized he could not win that type of fight. During his early missions over Búnker, New Guinea, he carefully watched the enemy and came to a simple conclusion: he would not play their game. Instead, Bong created his own strategy. First, climb high above the enemy, using the P-38's powerful engines, and always keep the altitude advantage. Second, convert that altitude into speed by diving down in a fast attack. Third, fire a short, precise burst from the Lightning's concentrated nose guns. Finally, use the aircraft's momentum to climb back to safety. No turning battles, no lingering. Strike fast, strike hard, and disappear. His combat reports reflected his quiet personality, short, calm, and clinical. But gun camera footage revealed something remarkable. Bong stalked his targets, patiently positioned himself carefully, fired a brief burst, and immediately broke away. While other pilots sprayed long streams of ammunition, Bong fired only when the shot was certain. Fellow ace Major Thomas Lynch described his technique as surgical, precise, controlled, and incredibly efficient. Much of Bong's success came from his natural mastery of deflection, shooting the difficult skill of firing not where the enemy aircraft is, but where it will be a fraction of a second later. Many pilots struggled with it for years. For Bong, it seemed instinctive. Soon his victories began to pile up, one aircraft, then another, sometimes two, in a single mission. In the skies above New Guinea, he became a silent predator, diving out of the sun, striking with deadly accuracy, then vanishing before the enemy could react. Japanese pilots began noticing a pattern of violent high-speed attacks from above by a strange twin-tailed fighter. They gave the aircraft a chilling nickname, the Fork-tailed Devil. On the nose of his own P-38, Bong painted the name of his sweetheart, back home Marge. The aircraft soon became legendary in the Pacific. For Japanese pilots, it meant sudden death. For American bomber crews, it meant protection. By early 1943, Richard Bong had become an ace. By the end of the year, his victory count was climbing rapidly, and the quiet farm boy from Wisconsin was turning into one of the most feared fighter pilots in the entire war. July 1943. High above the port of Lae, New Guinea, the sky was thick with smoke and tension. A massive formation of Japanese bombers, protected by swarms of Zero fighters, roared toward Allied positions on the ground. For the soldiers waiting below in their foxholes, it looked like an unstoppable storm of destruction. But far above the formation, hidden in the blinding sunlight, Richard Bong and his squadron were climbing, preparing to strike. This battle revealed how much Bong had evolved. He was no longer just a lone hunter in the sky, he was directing the fight itself. Instead of rushing into combat, he kept his P-38s high above the enemy formation, forcing Japanese pilots to stare into the glare of the sun. He waited with cold patience for the perfect moment when a bomber exposed its belly during the bombing run or a Zero drifted out of formation. Then he gave the order. The P-38 Lightnings dropped from the sky like silver predators. Bong led the charge, ignoring the agile Zeros and going straight for the bombers, the heart of the formation. One precise burst from his nose cannon, and a Mitsubishi bomber erupted in flames and black smoke. Bong didn't even watch it fall. He was already climbing again, converting speed back into altitude, searching for his next target. His squadron followed his example: strike, fast, climb away, and attack again. The Japanese pilots struggled to track the faster American fighters diving in and out of the sun. The results were devastating. Several enemy aircraft were destroyed, while the Americans suffered almost no losses. Japanese combat reports from that period began describing encounters with American fighters that attacked with terrifying speed and precision. They knew they were being hunted. By November 1943, Richard Bong had scored 21 confirmed victories, making him one of America's top aces. General George Kenney recognized the value of such a symbol during wartime. He personally awarded Bong the Distinguished Service Cross, and then made a decision Bong hated. He ordered the young ace back to the United States for a war bond tour. Suddenly, the quiet pilot who preferred silence and altitude was pushed into the spotlight. Crowds cheered. Newspapers across America printed his picture. To the public, Bong was the humble farm boy who had become a dragon slayer in the skies of the Pacific. But the attention made him deeply uncomfortable. He hated the speeches, the ceremonies, and the endless handshakes. In letters to his sweetheart Marge, he admitted something painful. His heart was still in the Pacific with the men who were still fighting. While they risked their lives in the air, he felt like a performer on display. Bong repeatedly begged General Kenny to send him back into combat. Finally, the general agreed. In March 1944, Bong returned to New Guinea, and a new weapon awaited him, the upgraded P-38J Lightning. The improved fighter had stronger engines, better high-altitude systems, and hydraulically boosted controls that made it far more maneuverable at high speeds. In Bong's hands, it became something deadly precise, a scalpel in the sky. But the war had changed. Years of brutal fighting had drained Japan's air forces. Many experienced pilots were gone, replaced by young men with limited training. The skill gap between the two sides had become enormous. Against a veteran ace like Bong with hundreds of combat hours, these new pilots often stood little chance. Bong's tactics continued to evolve. One of his most terrifying maneuvers was the head-on attack. Two fighters flying directly toward each other at closing speeds of over 800 miles per hour. Most pilots would break away early, afraid of collision. Bong didn't. He held his course guns firing until the final split second. His gun camera footage shows him blasting through enemy aircraft and flying straight through the debris as they exploded around him. The quiet farm boy from Wisconsin was no longer just surviving the war. He was dominating the skies. Before we close this story, there's one thing we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching this video from right now? Drop your country and city in the comments so everyone can see how far this story has traveled. Are you watching from the United States, Vietnam, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, or somewhere else entirely? Let us know. Below, your comment might even connect you with other viewers from the same place who are watching this story with you. By June 1944, the inevitable finally happened. During a mission over New Guinea, Richard Bong shot down his 27th and 28th enemy aircraft, surpassing the legendary Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 victories. With that moment, Bong officially became America's greatest living fighter ace. General George Kenny felt both pride and fear. To him, Bong was no longer just a pilot, he was a national symbol. Losing him in combat could devastate American morale. So Kenny immediately banned him from routine combat missions, declaring him far too valuable to risk. Bong was furious. Being grounded felt worse than facing enemy fighters. He believed his place was in the sky, flying alongside the men who had fought beside him since the beginning. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Kenny allowed Bong to fly again, but only on high-priority missions and only as a flight leader, where he could direct the battle rather than chase kills. In many ways, Bong had become a general in the sky. The restrictions didn't slow him down. If anything, they put him exactly where the fighting was most intense. In October 1944, during a mission over Balikpapan, Borneo, Bong escorted B-24 bombers attacking Japanese oil refineries. The Japanese threw everything they had into the air to defend their vital fuel supply. The sky exploded into a violent maze of dogfights. Bong positioned his P-38 formation with the sun at their backs, blinding the enemy before leading the first attack. Diving from above, he destroyed one enemy fighter in a burst of cannon fire. But as he pulled away, disaster struck. An enemy fighter had slipped behind him. Cannon shells slammed into his aircraft, tearing through the right engine. Warning lights flashed as the engine burst into flames and died. Most pilots would have disengaged immediately and limped home on one engine. That was the logical choice. Bong did the opposite. Calmly feathering the damaged propeller and triggering the fire extinguisher, he realized something important. His aircraft was still flying, and his guns still worked. Still, with smoke trailing behind him and his performance crippled, Bong turned his damaged P-38 back into the fight. Against all logic, he hunted down another Japanese fighter and shot it down before finally turning toward home. He flew hundreds of miles across open ocean on a single engine before landing safely. Ground crews were stunned when they saw the aircraft. The P-38 was riddled with bullet holes, and one engine was completely destroyed. They declared it beyond repair, but Bong refused to give up on the machine that had carried him through so many battles. He personally oversaw the repairs, and soon he was flying his beloved aircraft, Marge, once again. The story spread quickly. Bong was no longer just known for his skill. He had become something more, a fearless pilot who seemed impossible to break. His victory count continued climbing 35, 36, 38. By December 1944, Richard Bong had reached an astonishing total of 40 confirmed aerial victories, a number far beyond anything American pilots had ever achieved. At that point, the highest levels of command made a final decision. General Douglas MacArthur ordered that Bong be permanently removed from combat. It was no longer a suggestion, it was an order. The risk of losing America's greatest ace was simply too great. And so, whether he liked it or not, Richard Bong's war was over. America's ace of aces was going home. Richard Bong's final combat mission took place on December 17, 1944. There was no dramatic dogfight or final victory, just a routine patrol over the Pacific with no enemy contact. And with that quiet flight, the combat career of the most successful fighter pilot in American history came to an end. After years of brutal air battles, Bong returned to the United States. But instead of the quiet farm life he dreamed of, he stepped into a wave of national admiration. America was exhausted by war, and Richard Bong had become something larger than a pilot. He was a symbol of hope and determination. Soon afterward, he received the nation's highest military honor. In a formal ceremony at the Pentagon, Secretary of War Henry Stimson placed the Medal of Honor around Bong's neck. The official citation praised his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. It described his fearless leadership, his relentless pursuit of enemy aircraft, and his courage in battles where he often faced overwhelming odds. Yet as the words were read, Bong stood quietly, almost awkwardly, in his decorated uniform. Fame had never suited him. He was a man who communicated through action, far more comfortable in the cramped cockpit of a P-38 lightning 20,000 feet above the Pacific than in a room full of generals and politicians. After the ceremonies ended, Bong finally found a moment of peace. On February 10, 1945, he married his longtime sweetheart, Marge Vattendahl, in a church in Superior, Wisconsin. For a brief moment, the deadliest ace in American history was simply a young husband starting a new life. Across the world, the war that had defined his life was nearing its end. Europe was collapsing under Allied pressure, and even in the Pacific, the tide had turned. Yet Bong's extraordinary record still raises a question that historians continue to ask. How did one man achieve something that seems almost impossible? 40 aerial victories in one of the most dangerous wars in history. Part of the answer was the aircraft itself. The P-38 Lightning gave him speed altitude advantage and concentrated firepower. But the greater secret was Bong's discipline and patience. While many pilots chased dramatic dogfights, Bóng hunted carefully. He climbed above the enemy, attacked with speed, fired only when the shot was certain, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. That calm, calculated approach turned a quiet farm boy from Wisconsin into America's ace of aces, a pilot whose record of 40 confirmed victories remains one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of aerial warfare. Before we end, here's a question for you. Did anyone in your family serve during World War II? If so, share their story in the comments, their name, where they served, or what you know about their experience. History isn't just in books. Sometimes it lives in our own families. The secret behind Richard Bong's astonishing record lay in a powerful combination: the man, the machine, and a tactical doctrine years ahead of its time. After the war, Army Air Forces analysts studied Bong's gun camera footage in detail. What they discovered was remarkable. His hit percentage, the ratio of bullets fired to enemy aircraft destroyed, was extraordinarily high compared with the average fighter pilot. Bóng didn't spray ammunition and hope for luck. Every burst was deliberate. Every shot was calculated. Speed, angle, and timing formed a cold, precise formula that guided his attacks. Much of this instinct traced back to his childhood as a hunter in the forests of Wisconsin, where he learned patience tracking and the value of a single perfect shot. Over more than 200 combat missions, Bóng developed a tactical philosophy that eventually became a model for American fighter pilots in the Pacific. His method was built not on reckless aggression, but on discipline. While many pilots were drawn into dramatic turning dogfights, the kind often romanticized in war films, Bóng knew that trying to outmaneuver the agile Japanese Zero in a tight turn was often suicide. Instead, he approached air combat like a science built on 4 principles: energy, positioning, firepower, and discipline. First came energy. Bóng always fought with an advantage in altitude and speed, using the P-38 Lightning's powerful engines to climb above the enemy and control the battle. Second was positioning. He carefully used the sun clouds and the enemy's own formation to approach unseen, sometimes maneuvering patiently for minutes just to secure the perfect attack angle. Third was firepower. The P-38's nose-mounted guns allowed him to deliver a concentrated burst that could destroy an enemy aircraft in seconds. And fourth was discipline. After attacking, Bóng refused to stay in a turning fight. Instead, he used his superior speed to break away and climb back to altitude, preparing for the next strike. In essence, Bóng fought a vertical war of energy and physics, while many of his opponents were still fighting horizontally. The aircraft itself was also a crucial factor. The P-38 Lightning was perfectly suited to Bong's combat style. Its twin-engine design allowed it to survive heavy damage and still bring its pilot home, a fact Bóng proved when he returned from battle over Borneo with one engine destroyed. The aircraft's tricycle landing gear made it stable on rough Pacific airstrips, while its turbo superchargers gave it superior high-altitude performance that many Japanese fighters simply could not match. In the hands of an average pilot, the P-38 was a capable fighter. In the hands of Richard Bóng, it became a weapon of extraordinary effectiveness. Yet the most revealing insight into Bong's character came from his letters to Marge, the woman he loved. In those letters, he rarely spoke about his victories or his growing fame. Instead, he wrote about duty, about protecting bomber crews, supporting soldiers on the ground, and completing each mission as effectively as possible. Bong never saw himself as a glory-seeking ace. In his own mind, he was simply doing his job. There was no arrogance, no bravado, only the quiet focus of a master craftsman who had turned the chaos of aerial combat into a disciplined art. As 1945 began, Richard Bong's life should have been safe. He was a national hero, newly married and widely celebrated as America's greatest fighter ace. But the pilot in him could not stay away from the cockpit. The U.S. military decided his experience was too valuable to waste, giving him a new role as a test pilot. Aviation itself was about to change forever. For 4 decades, piston-engine aircraft had ruled the skies, but now a terrifying new technology was emerging: the jet engine. At Lockheed's secretive Skunk Works facility in Burbank, California, engineer Kelly Johnson, the same man who designed the P-38 Lightning, had built America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. Sleek and futuristic, the aircraft used a single jet engine, producing roughly 4,000 pounds of thrust, pushing it beyond 500 miles per hour. It represented an entirely new era of aviation. The Army Air Forces needed their most skilled pilots to test it, understand it, and help write the rules for jet combat. Richard Bong, the master of the piston engine fighter, was chosen to help lead that transition. For Bong, the assignment placed him at the center of a technological revolution. The P-80 was unlike anything he had flown before. There was no propeller, no engine torque, only the screaming thrust of a jet turbine. It handled differently, landed at dangerously high speeds, and climbed as if pulled upward by invisible force. Every pilot learning to fly jets was stepping into unexplored territory. Bong approached the challenge with the same calm discipline that had defined his combat career. He studied the aircraft carefully, learning its systems, testing its limits, and reporting his observations to engineers who were shaping the future of aviation. For several months, his life became a rhythm of flight logs, technical briefings, and the constant high-pitched whine of jet engines. Then came August 6, 1945, a hot summer day at the Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank, California. For Major Richard Bong, it seemed like another routine assignment. He was scheduled to perform an acceptance flight in a newly built P-80 Shooting Star fresh off the production line. After completing his pre-flight checks, he climbed into the cockpit. The canopy closed. The jet engine screamed to life. Bong taxied onto the runway, received clearance, pushed the throttle forward, and the sleek aircraft surged into the sky. But seconds after takeoff, disaster struck. A primary fuel pump failed, starving the engine of fuel. The jet flamed out. Suddenly, Bong found himself in a powerless aircraft at dangerously low altitude above the sprawling suburbs of Los Angeles. Without engine power, the P-80 glided poorly, almost like a falling brick. For a man who had survived more than 200 combat missions, who had fought swarms of enemy fighters, and even flown a crippled P-38 home, on one engine, this became his final and most desperate battle. He fought to regain control. Training took over as he attempted emergency restart procedures, but there was not enough altitude. He tried to glide back toward the runway, but the distance was too great. With the ground racing upward, Bong made one final decision. He attempted to bail out, but it was too late. The aircraft was too low. The P-80 crashed into a field and exploded in flames, Major Richard Ira Bong, America's ace of aces. The quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, who had become the deadliest American fighter pilot of World War II, was killed instantly. He was only 24 years old. On that very same day, August 6, 1945, half a world away, another aircraft was making history. High above the skies of Japan, an American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay opened its bomb bay and released a single strange-looking weapon. The bomb fell silently toward the city of Hiroshima. Moments later, a blinding flash lit the sky, and the terrifying power of the atom erased an entire city. In that instant, the world entered a new and frightening age. The news of Richard Bong's death, the loss of America's greatest fighter ace, was quickly overshadowed by the global shock of the atomic bombing. It became a small story buried beneath headlines announcing the dawn of the nuclear era. In a tragic twist of history, the master of conventional aerial combat died on the very day that the nature of warfare itself changed forever. The kind of war Bong had fought, close-range dogfights between propeller-driven fighters, was already becoming a relic of the past. 80 years later, Bong's record of 40 confirmed aerial victories still stands. It is a number that will almost certainly never be surpassed. Modern air combat has transformed into something very different. Radar-guided missiles, long-range engagements and battles fought beyond visual range. The era of the gunslinging fighter ace, the pilot who looked his enemy in the eye through a gun sight, is gone. But Bong's true legacy was never just the 40 aircraft he destroyed. It was the bomber crews he escorted safely through enemy skies, the soldiers on the ground who depended on air cover, and the tactical methods he pioneered that would save the lives of countless other pilots. His disciplined approach to combat, speed, altitude, positioning, and precision became the foundation of American fighter tactics for years to come. General George Kenney, the commander who once spared Bong's career after his reckless early flying, later wrote that Bong was the greatest fighter pilot he had ever seen. According to Kenney, Bong's success came not from reckless aggression, but from its opposite: calm, calculated precision. He made victory look effortless because he fought using sound, repeatable principles, turning air combat into something closer to a science than a gamble. Today in Wisconsin, at the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center, his Medal of Honor rests quietly and on display. Nearby stands a restored P-38 Lightning bearing the name Marge on its nose, a tribute to both the aircraft and the man who mastered it. It is a reminder of a time when a quiet farm boy from the American Midwest climbed into the cockpit of a fighter plane and, through discipline and extraordinary skill, changed the course of aerial warfare. The battlefields where Bong fought are now silent. The skies where he once dueled enemy fighters are empty. Yet his record remains carved into the history of military aviation: 40 victories, 200 combat missions, one unbreakable legend. Richard Ira Bong, the farm boy who became America's deadliest and most untouchable ace.